All right, so we're going to take a look at a hand between LLinusLLove and ja.same.gale at 5100 LL on PokerStars. This will be like a small blind versus button 3-bet pot situation. So I took this hand from the high stakes thread on 2+2, and let's see if I can restart this. We'll have a look at it here. So ja.same.gale opens button for 2.5x. Our hero in this case, LLinusLLove, 3 bets to 10.5 big blinds. The flop comes 8-5, 4 suited. Pretty shitty flop for the small blind 3-better, obviously, since the guy in the button is going to have all these suited connectors and sets and stuff like that. So interestingly, LLinusLLove here full pots on the flop, and then proceeds to shove the turn on the jack double suited overcard. So this is a pretty interesting hand. I don't really have this type of play in my arsenal that often, so I'm interested in how Linus picks his spot here. It seems like something that he's liable to do on presumably at a low frequency on these low connected flops in 3-bet pot situations out of position. So he shoves the turn. ja.same.gale snaps it off with the pair plus flush draw and the ace overcard. And LLinusLLove shows up with ace of spades, king of diamonds, which seems pretty loose to me, I think. It seems like an okay candidate for the flop bet, holding the diamond and the 2 overs. However, on the turn, it seems like if you're shoving this hand, you're going to be piling in a whole bunch of hands. Now, the Jack of Hearts is a pretty good card for a range. Usually when you select these large polarized sizings on the flop, then the overcard turns that, like aren't an ace and are somewhat disconnected to the board are going to be really, really good for the 3-better and the continuation better. However, I don't know if it's that good that you should be shoving ace king here. The king blocks flush draws, which you kind of want the guy in the button to have for him to be calling with for value, or folding out. Doesn't really matter too much for us when we hold ace king. And yeah, like ace king blocks like king jack, ace jack, but most of those I would expect to be folded out in the flop, so it doesn't really do that great a job of blocking, ace jack, king jack, any of the jacks. I mean, does block like king 8 suited. King 8, or not even king 8 suited, but ace 8 suited, I guess, but it's not that much. So, looking at the sim, I gave Linus this 3-betting range from the small blind, about 16% 3-bet, which is pretty loose. We could probably tighten it up a bit, but 3-betting all the large pocket pairs, some of the smaller ones, some of these suited aces and kings and broadways, stuff like that. And then in position, flatting, all the pocket pairs up until, 10s, jacks, queens, which are getting 4-bet somewhat often, and some of these suited cards. And for the solver tree, these are the options put in. I ran a sim previous to this and, gave multiple bet sizings for, the flop in on the turn, and then simplified to just single bet sizings. So in fact, the simulation, when you give, the flop alternate bet sizings like this, it actually chooses the 100% one most often, so I just went up with that. And when you check to the in-position player, he's going to be stabbing sometimes with small bets or polarizing on the turns. So, in fact, we see that, yeah, this 8-5-4 suited isn't really that great of a flop for this 3-better. Our equity is 48.5%, which is pretty bad for the 3-better, so nearly as bad as it can get. So consequentially, Linus should be checking this flop a whole bunch, so 81% of the time, but mixing in some of this full pot bets with hands that really need it. So like Jack Jack, 10-10, 9-9, Queen Queen, as well as Ace-8. You know, top pair, top picker are very vulnerable, high value hands that kind of want to shove in. So we build this large betting size range around that, and then just throw in some backdoor flush draws like Queen 10 of hearts, Queen Jack of hearts, as well as flush draws like King Jack of diamonds, you know, Ace 7, Ace 6, Ace 3 of diamonds type of thing to balance it out, and then some offsuit hands with a diamond on the flop to round out our bluffing range on flush turns and flush rivers kind of thing. Now Ace King off doesn't really enjoy betting that often. It prefers to check, but it's not so much of a mistake to rip it in, I suppose. It's being bet with a very small frequency. So we rip it in, we get a call, and turn is the Jack of hearts. And here, in fact, the card is so good for a range that we're only checking the turn 13.2% of the time, so you could probably just simplify this to either ripping it in with most of your range or block betting with some of it. The hands that want to block bet are kind of these Jack X, which we proved to on the turn, which have a flush draw with them. Kind of these invulnerable hands that really don't want to fold out any, say, like ace high type hands, weaker flush draws, single pair hands that the button might fold if we just rip it in. But the main bet sizing on the turn for Linus is actually just a shove. And with Ace King off, if we get there on the turn, then it's following through, you know, a decent amount of the time, but it's one of the hands that it's going to be just checking and likely giving up, looking to get the showdown instead. Same with like a King Queen off, which we bluffed the flop with, and a, you know, King 10 off. These ones are just kind of check, give up hands. They're really kind of the worst hands for us to be ripping in, it seems. We have much better hands like these, you know, Queen 10 of hearts, things with flush draws. We have all these flush draws. We have all these over pairs that could just look to rip in instead. So Linus does rip it in, kind of like a slight overbluff, I would say, on the whole, both on the flop and on the turn, so erring on the size of over-aggression. And ja.same.gale with ace 4 diamonds just plays the pretty standard call line, and gets it in and ends up taking it down. So nothing too surprising on his part there. So takeaways from this are oftentimes when I am the 3-better in this situation, I see this like terrible flop, ace 5-4 diamonds, basically as bad as it can get. I'm liable to just check my entire range, but maybe it's worthwhile to carve out this just bed jam type of range with hands, especially like Jack Jack. Like Jack Jack really does not want to check the flop here, so it makes sense to build something around that. So when I see a very, very bad flop for me, I should take my like vulnerable one pair hands and think about just ripping it in with them. So ace 8, jack jack, and then doing some like low frequency bluffing ranges. So rolling low on some flush draws, put them in that range, some backdoor flush draws, as well as some offsuit single card flush draws. As well, let's have a look at the turns once we bet so large on the flop. So, like I said, when you choose a very large polarizing size on the flop and you go to the turn with that polarized range, these disconnected overcards are going to be very, very good for you. So all the 10s, all the jacks, even the kings, queens, 9s are pretty good. 8s, not that great. It's a bit, that pair isn't that great for you. So these type of hands I should be looking to just continue bluffing at a high frequency. Let's say the turn is something a bit less good for us than a jack. Let's say we get like a 9 of clubs. Here there's only a 33% check frequency again. So it's still getting bluffed and continue to fair bit often, because we go with such a strong range to the turn. We have all these flush draws. We'll pick up some straight draws, but we can check fold kind of this offsuit garbage. Continue bluffing with some of our 1 diamond hands to set us up for bluffing flush rivers. But other than that, pretty easy business. And then on like a connecting turn, like say what was the worst turn card for us? 7 of clubs. Say on a 7 of clubs, just increasing the checking frequency, just bluffing at a lower frequency, checking some more of these flush draws and straight draws type of hands. So that's about it from Linus's point of view. Now, like I said, he seems to be over bluffing this slightly with the ace-king hand, is kind of my takeaway from this, which indicates to me that maybe defending against it isn't so easy. So let's look at ja.same.gale's theoretical defense range. On the flop, pretty much you can get away with folding some of the weakest pairs, 3-3-2-2 to the full pot, as well as ace-4 without any flush draws. But most pairs he's going to have to continue with, as well as all these flush draws, jack 10 suited, queen 10 of diamonds, straight draws, even ace 3 spades, which is just like a gut shot with the ace over, which isn't that great. And even something like ace jack with a single diamond is getting continued fairly often. Even king queen with a single diamond, king queen off. Ace queen off with a diamond, ace king off with a diamond, ace queen of hearts. Some of these, anything with all these suited broadways with a flush draw, which are pretty easy finds. Even single card straight draws like king 7 of clubs, king 6 of clubs. And just ripping over with 10-10, jack-jack, ace-8 type of hands, along with some combo draws like 8-7, 8-6, king 7, king 6, a6, a7, at almost 10% of the time, which isn't negligible. So kind of these vulnerable hands, ja.same.gale should have the same incentive as us to just rip them in on the flop, because we really don't want to see an overcard. but it's still a reasonably wide defending range on the flop. So not easy to call here with ace jack of a single diamond, or ace deuce of clubs. It's not the greatest thing. And if we get the call and the jack of hearts turn, and Linus shoves on us, here basically calling with any jack, obviously, that we get to the turn with, folding 7-7-6-6. Okay, calling ace 3 of hearts, which is kind of a cruddy combo draw, which is kind of like borderline calling range, I guess, but it's very low EV, only $157 out of like a $20,000 pot to be made with these ace 3, ace deuce of hearts hands, so not that big of a deal if you let them go. And yeah, most of the 8x can fold like 10-8, 9-8, 6-5, 6-4 hands. Calling with all the sets, obviously. So turn isn't that hard to play for ja.same.gale. I would expect him to call pretty easily with 10s, 9s here. And 7-7-6-6. Some people might even call these on the turn with the straight draw to go along with them. So you can get away with playing the turn pretty tight, I think, or pretty standard, but it's a bit difficult to play the flop in position shoes, I think. Here you just kind of call with decent pairs and some combo draws that just barely have the equity. Okay, so I think I'll shut it down there. Thank you for watching.